Hello and welcome to this wonderful course on Web IDE. Now, Web IDE is going to be the focus towards this entire course. We will be seeing, first of all, what is Web IDE. We will try to install. Before that, we'll get a basic background about why Web IDE came to picture and what is the entire story all about. Then we will create a simple application using Web IDE. We will connect to our ABAP repository and try to push the simple application we created. We'll also connect to Git Hub. You can connect to your internal Git. So normally there's a difference between Git and GitHub. GitHub is the global Git repository. So anyone can basically use this GitHub account. And if you're trying to use Git locally in your own company, then you can also connect your Web IDE with Git. We will be connecting to this global GitHub account, which I have, and I will try to push my code there, and I will try to deploy my application, or on a simple word, try to push my change into this global repository so anyone can access this code. So normally you have your in-house Git deployed, so anyone who is your colleague working in the same project can really extract the project which you are working with, can take the code, can do the modification and push a new version of it. So that's how a team actually works in a project. And the front-end application is built with Git as a repository. And mostly once all the development is done, then you deploy the application to your ABAP server, HANA server, or any different server based on how your architecture is. We will be keeping it simple. We'll try to walk you through with a basic understanding of Web IDE. Once you complete this particular video, then you will have a good understanding about what is SAP Web IDE, why it came into picture, how to work with it, how to do development of UI5 application with it. So who should take this particular course? Who should basically view the entire course? If you are a BAPper, you're trying to figure out how to work with this Web IDE, or try to do the application development with this Web IDE. That's the first category. If you belong to that, I highly recommend watching this entire video to the completion. And the second category is if you are trying to learn UI5 for first time, then UI5 is one of the prominent application development framework, front-end application development framework used in enterprise app. This is developed by SAP themselves, and you are trying to learn this to create enterprise application, then this particular video will be helpful to you. I will try to keep the concept as simple as possible, as interesting as possible. If you have any questions regarding this video, you can directly ask me in the comment section of this video, and I hope that this entire section will be a starting point for you in Web IDE or in UI5. Okay, so let's go first of all to understand the history about the Web IDE. Now, when it comes to Web IDE, why Web IDE came into picture and how we used to do application development in the olden age or dinosaur age. No, how we used to do application development couple of years back or a couple of months back. We used to do most of the application development with Eclipse. This is one particular tool name, but there are multiple flavor of Eclipse. Mars, there is Luna, there is Kepler, and there is Moon, a lot of things. So what happens is we have so many different types of Eclipse version, and we get the development component for the developments to be done in our hana.ondemand.com. That is the single repository. So if I go to hana.ondemand, where I have to add a prefix of tools.hana.ondemand.com/UI5, you can basically go to this page. This is tools.hana.ondemand.com, and you can see that there are multiple different types of tabs present. Now, all of these are basically the basic tools you will require to be able to work with it. You have ABAP tools, cloud tool, cloud integration tool, HANA tool, IDM tool, ML Foundation, mobile, SAP UI5. Most important part, which we are going to see here, is SAP UI5 tools. Now, this is the Web IDE personal edition, which you will be installing in your computer. And then you have this basically paid version of it. I will highly recommend for you, if you're trying to do the development starting from it, either go with your personal edition, put it in the computer, try to play with it. And the first one is the evaluation edition. which is for non-production use. So if you're trying to build an application for productive customer, you're trying to build it in a live production scenario, then the second version is what is used. For the first version, this is typically for learning demo purpose, which is non-commercial nature. So that is what we are going to use. We are not going to sell our application to any SAP customer or partner. So we'll be using this particular version, the personal version of Web IDE for non-productive use. Very clear, because this is one of the very important aspects regarding which software you should use for licensing related activities to be taken care of in the first stage itself. So this website, tools.hana.ondemand.com, is the central place where you will be able to download all the components. May it be related to Eclipse, may it be related to a app development, may it be related to your cloud integration, or also the Web IDE which we are going to install. We will be referring to tools.hana.ondemand.com. This is the place where you can get most of the tools required for development, or which will be essential for developers to start development work activities or plugins or add-ons to the development. So this is one essential platform you should be aware about based on what are the platforms you have for development. Now, what happened here? So we have this Eclipse and we installed the version of Eclipse. And Eclipse is an open source platform or a open source IDE, integrated development environment. So just to give you a background about IDE, is your normal text editor or code editor with additional capability of integration, deployment of the code, which makes the code much easier to write, much faster to write. So all that, when it comes to a particular editor, then it becomes IDE. So a editor can be your Sublime editor. Sublime is basically an editor. Notepad++ is a editor. But when it comes to Eclipse, you have multiple new features within the Eclipse, which is based on how can you deploy the code to the backend, how you deploy the code to GitHub, how can you pull the code, how you can do integration setting with your components, all this additional feature which is required for a integrated development environment to create that. You can do debugging in Eclipse, but you cannot do debugging in Sublime. You can do JavaScript debugging in Sublime with some of the other add-ons, but typically it is not what you should be doing. When it comes to Eclipse, it comes with all the additional added power packs in it, which makes it a development environment where developers can really say, okay, I can have just Eclipse, I can do entire development for my project, I can debug it, put it into my development environment and take that code into production environment. That is enough for the developer to use. So that is Eclipse. So that's the reason why it is called a integrated development environment and not a editor or a basic editor. Now what happens is, previously we used to set all this software component in our own computers. It can be our own personal computer, office computer, where we used to install this Eclipse and we used to say, okay, I have the Eclipse now. I just need to add the add-ons from the repository like tools.hana.ondemand. I can add the UI5 repository, HANA development repository, a app development repository. But that used to take a lot of time. It can be 2-3 hours, 1 hour, and then you have to set it up in each different machine. So what happens is, over time, the complexity or the amount of your resource required, the RAM, when talking about resource, it's basically RAM. The amount of RAM required in a particular computer to be able to work with your IDEs, because once we start adding more and more capabilities to this IDE, that okay, you can do magic in this IDEs, you can drag and drop UIs and build the UIs, you don't need to remember the code anymore and all this, then it was making the RAM requirement go higher. So what happens, any computer should have more than 8 GB of RAM to be able to smoothly function with Web IDE. You can have 4 GB of RAM or 2 GB of RAM, you can work with it, but if you have 8 GB of RAM, it will be pretty smooth. So this kind of machine requirement came into picture. So normal computing decided to not make a computer dependent upon the tools. So what I mean by that, what if I have a central server and my application is basically the Web IDE application is hosted in this central server. So I have one instance which is running this application, and you basically access this application with your browser. You don't need much of computation space to run that particular application. You are just accessing through your browser. You are just basically working on it, but all the tools or hardware requirement you don't need. So the computer application will be running on some cloud, and you are basically accessing a particular version of it using your browser. Can be Chrome browser, Firefox browser, any browser. You don't need a fancy computer with good capabilities. You can do it in any device, even in the mobile device or tablet. You can just open your browser, attach your keypad, and start development. You can do that when you have only the browser required to development. So therefore the Web IDE came into picture, and primarily when it comes to Web IDE, the focus is always on the Web IDE in the cloud. So the Web IDE comes from the cloud, where in the backend it is hosted by SAP themselves. You basically log on to the SAP cloud and get access to this app, and this app is open in the Chrome browser, and you start development. Now the version of the Web IDE which we will be seeing is personal Web IDE, which is installed in your own machine. Why we are doing it? We are doing it because you get a look and feel. You basically own the Web IDE in your own landscape. You try to experiment with it without having much of computer connectivity. For learning purpose, this is best, but for productive use, a Web IDE which is hosted in the cloud is much preferred. Okay, so that is how the story of Web IDE is, and that is why we focused, or SAP or the entire software community itself focused to make the Web IDE come out of the computer and go in the cloud space. Now let's go into the simple basic installation process of a Web IDE and start to work with the Web IDE. So let's go into our machine, and here I'm going to go into toolsondemand.com. So I'm going to go into UI5, SAP UI5, and here you will be able to download the Web IDE personal edition, which you will be installing in your own machine. I read and agree, and suddenly the Web IDE starts to download. Now one thing you will need apart from this is 7-zip. 7-zip is an archiving and archiving software, because the zip file which you are getting is a zip file which you need to extract. You can extract it with an archiving tool, but 7-zip have some extra added capabilities which comes into picture when the file's names are of larger size. When your file names are of larger size, then some of the unarchiving tool face issues. So 7-zip is what I will prefer if you have it. So install 7-zip from 7zip.org. You can get a standalone version or a installation version. For example, this is for the exe file, or you can have a standalone version as well somewhere in the download section. So here you can see that you have your MSI file and your exe file for your installation in your particular type of Windows machine or Mac machine or Linux machine, any type of machine. Based on that, you can download this. We have already got the Web IDE, and what we are going to do is we are going to right click here, and the 7-zip will come here, extract here. So it will start extracting the file. It will take about 10 seconds to 20 seconds based on how much fast your computer is, and give it a few seconds, and we'll pause the recording within that duration. Okay, so at this point we have extracted the entire files. We didn't get any error, and this is the particular folder where it basically extracted everything. So here we have Eclipse, and this is called Orion. Now Orion is basically one of the version of Eclipse. How it's different from other versions? So there are multiple versions of Eclipse like Mars, Luna, Kepler. Now the Orion version is the version of Eclipse which has a web development environment setup, and your SAP Web IDE is using the Orion Eclipse to build the packages and all the tools for you to primarily focus on developing UI5 app your service development and application based on Gateway or HANA. So inside the engine, inside the Eclipse Orion or SAP Web IDE, we have Eclipse Orion. So that is why we have this Orion application launcher or exe file. As you can see, this is the application file. What I'm going to do, I'm going to just double click. Nothing complicated. That's all. So once I double click on this Orion folder, then you would be seeing your web ID in localhost 8080/webid/index.html. So this is the first page you will see once you have successfully installed Web IDE. You can see that you're using port 8080. If by some mean that port is occupied, then you will face some issue and you have to basically stop the program which is occupying 8080 or try to use Web IDE in a different port. Now how we will configure that if your port is different in your computer and you cannot use port 8080, if some application program is running which you cannot stop, then how to do that, how to do the configuration, those advanced configuration. For that you have to go through our SAP Professional and Advanced course. That is the highest rated course on learning Web IDE and highly recommended course from my side. So now let's go and proceed with the steps or development which we have set for ourselves. What I'm going to do, I'm going to create a new account. I'm going to say user Ajay Tech 123 and you can have a proper username, not like a 123 kind of thing. You can give your company ID, whatever. Mind you, this is the evaluation product, so this should not be used for any productive use to sell any software which you build through that. Okay, so let me give a password, retype the password again, give an email and sign up. So these details which we have provided is actually kept in the local machine. If I try to go in Chrome here and try to say, okay, localhost web ID, I can create one more account and log in from that account, and all the development related activity for that particular user will be kept separate. So this is in a way user management, and all the user information details and what are the development which a particular user have done is kept in the local side. It will be pretty different when it comes to the cloud, because if you're trying to access the cloud web ID, which is nothing but an application which you are trying to reach from a URL, you have to then use the SSO or different mechanism to basically authenticate developer. So to keep the thing simple, we have installed the web ID, created an account. The details of that account is used for local authentication because this is the personal version of the web ID, and I have just logged inside. Now, if you see here localhost 8080, if I go into just this, then I will see my Eclipse Orion original web ID. So this is the Orion based web ID, and not the web ID of SAP, but this is the Eclipse version of web ID. We'll not be doing much of development here in the Eclipse version of the web ID, but we will be doing much of the development here in our SAP version of the web ID. So no need to confuse here. We have two different versions of web ID installed in our machine. Once we get the web ID component installed, this is the original Orion, and using the original Orion, we have an additional version which is capable of creating or focused on UI5 application development or Fiori application development. So these are two most important part which we will be working in terms of web ID. So either you will be working on UI5 application development, Fiori application development, and few other important part of deployment, syncing the code is done with your web ID. Okay, so let's start with a new project. So you can see that there are 4 ways provided here, and there are 4 ways provided here for integration. Now let's talk about this quickly. First, we have a quick start with layout editor. Once I do that, I would be creating a sample application from the template. It will be just application for me to get an understanding about how the development of application should be done. These are the demo application presented to you. The second is the application development with a template project. This is how you should start a project. There are simple template file provided to you. So this is for version 1.44. I can select different version based on what is the version of my UI5 in my SAP NetWeaver Gateway or the systems which host the UI5 application. And I will go into all categories. So see all the categories. You have a CRUD application, a list report application, an overview page application with tiles information, a master detail application, a work list application with just a list, and a simple custom UI5 application. So these are all different types of UI5 application template which you should be starting with. And I highly recommend, if you are creating a scratch application, then go and use the template. Some of the code already comes from the template itself. And this is sample UI5 application. Again, this is just for you to try out that application, see the code of the application, see the UI5 development, and they follow a standard guideline principle for you to learn as well. And this is the extension project. We have seen this extensively in your Fiori for developer course. We have tried all the different types of extension in a simple project. For changing any standard Fiori application, you use a extension project. Now here we have importing an archive. You have a zip file which contains the entire application of SAP UI5. You import it here, and that particular application can be then utilized in your Web IDE to extend, to change some code, to deploy in SAP. All that can be done here. And you have the connectivity of your SAP App repository. Your SAP App repository, where it relies on? Your SAP App repository, it is present in your NetWeaver Gateway. If you have the component more than 7.5 or 7.4, then you will be able to host a UI5 application in your NetWeaver Gateway. And that is where your application are hosted when a customer is trying to call a UI5 application. It comes from your gateway server. Your gateway server acts as an application development server, and by this feature in your Web IDE, you will be able to connect to a gateway server. For example, I have already connected. If I say sign in, this is asking me for a single sign-on or a pop-up authentication. It will show me all the particular application present in my gateway. It will take a few seconds, and after that we'll show it. And there are a couple of different systems also. It will show based on which system you want to do connectivity. How to do the setting we will see in a couple of seconds as well, but it will take some time and try to get or fetch all the system requirement and give me the details here. We will do this thing later on. Let's first try to understand all these features out here, what they mean. Now the final thing is your Git repository. Now Git here is an important part when it comes to your front-end application development. You have a team, you do development with a team. Your colleague who is working on the same application will be really getting a lot of problem if you don't use Git. So when you work in a development or production environment where you are doing serious application development, then they would be nowadays using Git. And how this Git works, it's pretty simple. You have this Web IDE. I will be connecting to a repository. This repository will be responsible for holding all of my changes. If I say, okay, I took a version of the code, I do my changes there. This is my changes. And I try to say, okay, take this version of the code. This is developed by me, added few features on this code. Then my colleague who is in the same project, instead of he taking the older version of the code, can basically take the new version of the code and start from that. So a version management system, which is acting as a central repository for your UI development, is crucial nowadays. And when it comes to Web IDE, they have the inbuilt capability both in the Orion based and the Web IDE based or any other Web IDE from different vendors. You will see Git is a must. We will explore the Git as well. We'll connect with the GitHub and try to push our project as well. Okay, so let's start from creating a simple project. We'll create a simple project from template, and I will try to create a simple master detail application because that's something which is very popular. We will create it with the version 1.44, because if you go and see our SAP version, SAP UI5 version in my backend SAP, then it would be 1.44. So you have to be pretty careful that which version of UI5 you are selecting. Okay, let's go to the next step and say demo project app, or just keep it my first app, because that's going to be your first app. If not your first app, then maybe second app, or whatever the version of app is. Okay, so let's go to the next section. This is the data connection. As you can see in the tab, these are the 5 steps you need to go through to be able to create a project. Now you have to have a system connected to a backend or a service connected to the backend to be able to start the application with a template. So if you want to use Web IDE, use a project or a template, then you have to have a backend service. Without a backend service, you will not be able to create an application with a template. You can have a OData service, just that OData service, that will be enough, but you need to have that. So more information about how you can integrate OData service, how can you integrate your backend app system, everything we have covered in SAP Professional and Advanced course for Web IDE. I highly recommend again that course. Now, what we need to do here, we need to select the system NPL. Now, when we see here that we have a NPL system connectivity already done, from where it came into picture. So to connect to a SAP backend or to connect it to a simple service, you have to have a configuration file added. So if you go into this config_master inside the installation folder, you have service.destination, and there is a file which doesn't have extension with the name NPL. Now let's open this file into our Sublime, and here as you can see that this is some of the parameters setting which need to be carried out to be able to connect with a backend system. Now what you can do with the backend system, and what are the different types of backend system which can be connected. The backend system can be a SAP system in which you can put your UI5 code, from where you can get access to the OData calls, or you can basically connect it to a SAP HANA system, get access to all the services, put the UI5 application back, or you can also connect to a just service, a OData service source. So these are different types of destination from where you can configure your Web IDE. Now what happens in this NPL system? It's a simple system which has NetWeaver Gateway 7.5 and above component. And as per the description, the parameters are, first we have description, type, trust all. What happens is this description can be anything. This is something which you know that what is the system name. Then the type is HTTP, and trust all is true, means that what is the authentication type? Do you trust it, or else you pass your user ID and password. So in the line number 4, I can see that authentication is no authentication. If you want to give some authentication while you try to get the service, you will see that when I try to open the application at that particular time, I will be required to give my username and password. So in this case, if you go back to our system here, I have provided as no authentication and trust my calls. And when it trusts, it will basically authenticate by giving you a pop-up where you need to put user ID or password. It will be carried out for any user who is trying to use the application or is trying to use this connectivity or this destination. Now the NPL is my system name, and now here this is my name of the system. This might be a little blurred out, you might not be able to see this, and either you can have a proxy in your architecture where the systems are, or you cannot. So if you are having proxy, then you have to configure it in the Orion and give the appropriate proxy. Now as my servers are easily accessible through internet or maybe intranet, I will have to mention as internet is my proxy and give the IP and the port number. Port number can be your 8000, 8200, or it can be also 443 if you are using HTTPS. So these are some port number which are commonly used, and Web IDE usage is what you're trying to do. I can basically connect to the backend app program, UI5 application I can put in the ABAP repository. I can develop ABAP objects and get the service calls out from the SAP system, which are OData based. So these are basically types and properties and parameter. And at the end, I have the Web IDE system and Web IDE enablement. So these are some of the standard parameter and value properties which you need to mention to be able to communicate with your backend system. Now, more about this, we have properly covered what are all the parameter means and how different types of OData will differ in terms of setting. You can go and watch this SAP Professional and Advanced course. I highly recommend this course again. Okay, so what we are going to do is we are going to select a property. I'm going to select this custom service, which is this ZEPM. So if I select this particular service, the final one, the last service, then you will see that the particular service is selected. Now the next screen is where we have to select the fields. You have a sample reference, then these are the mapping. So for example, the first one is your object title, second is object numeric attribute, third is object unit of measurement, and fourth is line item number here, and then fifth is line item ID, number, and unit measurement, seventh one. So these are 7 points which you need to map it here. Now as a title, I will say my first app, and namespace I will say demo here, description also demo I will write, and this is the header information, and we are basically going to get a purchase order item and order. The order is the header information and item is the item level information. So what we are going to do now is fill all the blocks here. If you fill all the blocks, then the standard code will be generated in your particular application, which we will see in a couple of seconds. Now what is happening is it's trying to make the entire application without even writing a line of code. This is good because if you try to start from something, starting from scratch is always a bad idea, because you will do some mistakes in some of the standard codes or some of the codes which might be repeated every time. Any application, if you try to create front-end application, will have a structure, and this structure most of the time will remain same. So this structure is getting generated once we select all the attributes. You don't worry much if you are selecting the wrong attribute, because later on we have the capability to change as well. But try to make as much as correct this particular information as you can. For example, here in the title, I will try to give the name. So let's try to select it from this service. This data are coming from the backend service we configured or selected in the step 3 from the backend. So let's try to make it the purchase order number. So we will be saying, okay, what is the title would be purchase order ID, which is already present in collection ID. So that we are selecting. The attribute is going to be this particular field here, and it will be the price for that particular purchase order. And I would say gross amount, and here the measurement is what is the unit. So we can either leave it blank if we don't find the unit here, and let's see if we can find the unit. If we don't find the unit also, then we can leave it blank on give the delivery address or delivery date, something like that. So changed at delivery date earlier. So this is what I'm using as a unit. So here normally you have the unit, but as we don't have the unit, we are giving as a delivery date. Later on, we can do the changes in the application code as well if you want to do the changes. Now this is the line item. So here the header value, if you see the detail screen, these are all list item which are part of the purchase order. These are header information, a brief overview. Once you click it in the right hand side, you see the details here. In the details, you see the line item details. So that's what it is asking. So we have the 4 and 5, 6, 7, which is your item title, collection ID, and then number attributes and unit of measurement. So these 4 I need to put. So it can be purchase order item, and ID here is ID as well, purchase order ID, and here as well I will say title as item positioner, position number can be 1020 with the leading zeros, and number attribute as gross amount, and here unit of measurement is what is a quantity unit here. So that's all, and finish it. So once I finish it, I will see a application. If I run this, how I run it, I press on this green button and it will basically either run with the mock data, and if I have connection with the system, it will use the system data. For that, it will authenticate me, check if I have the access to run the backend service correspond to that. So you can see that there are a lot of mistakes which we have done. We have added this ID and pricing, but this is what we have given as a time. And we should not be giving it as a time because we have given as a time unit. And if I press on that, you can see that product ID is mentioned, here price is mentioned, and here the timestamp is mentioned. So we need to do some changes here. And how we do the changes, line item looks fine, but we have a lot of changes to be done in the list. So if we see the application here, the structure of the application is quite new. We have a manifest.json file. This manifest.json file is basically holding all the setting for your application. May it be backend call services, which is the service responsible, what is the version of the application, what are the routing. Routing is one of the most important part for this new types of UI5 application, because what happens in this routing is that you have a central root view, which is, you will see in the view here, app.view.xml. This act, or the only role for this file, is to act as a central file, and it basically navigate to detail page, the main page, the home page, all those pages it will go. And once you have this file act as a container. This view, or you can say, act as a container for the entire application. So in the manifest file, you need to provide the ID of your app file. You will see that here, ID app controller, as the app file, which I will also call as a root file. Now after that, all the routing has been defined and all this code are generated. You don't have to really write this code because a lot of spelling mistake or typo can come into picture, or you have to basically copy from a template. You have this template already built in the Web IDE which you can use. Now if you go into the detailed view part, these are the code which are generated. These are the good standard codes with the good standard best practices already been followed. You can change the table, columns, headers, item, all those based on your requirement, and those changes will be directly happening in the application. Okay, so what I'm going to do, I'm going to take this particular application as per the plan and try to push it to my SAP system. So let's try to right click here and deploy to SAP UI5 repository. I will select the system, and as you can see that my version and the version of the UI5 code should be same. So version can be different. As you can see, this is 1.44.12, 1.44.4. So those are compatible. If I have my UI5 application as 5.2 version and the SAP system doesn't have the 5.2 version, latest is 4.4, then I will not be able to push my code, UI5 code, into the SAP system. Okay, so I will give a name of this application, my first app, demo, and here the package name, I will browse and select it as tmp temp as a local object, and I will be done deploying my application. What happens here is the deployment part is done. I can see the console and see what is the progress which is happening. Now give it a few seconds, and in the meantime I can go into my SAP system and I will say SAP log on, and the app name is ZMy first. So this is has been deployed, and all the task has been properly executed. So let's go into our SAP system and execute the application and launching it from our SAP gateway server. So let's log in here, and I will log in with my developer credentials, and the T code in which we will go is the object navigator, because we are going to basically see the UI5 application repository. So let's go to SE80, and here I will try to find the application. So let's see what is the application. So here The application is Z My First, and I'm going to say Z, and this is going to be a BSP application. So Z My First App. So this is the application we have, and here if we see the entire things, we have the controller, view, model. So what we have here, if we closely look, is that there is no index file. We have the structure. You can also see that the way we executed here in our application, when we try to use Web IDE, this run, we launched this test file and we ran in app in FLB sandbox, which is Fiori Launchpad sandbox environment. So it created an environment, launched the component.js file for our application, and from where the entire application got loaded. Now you have to understand is the new way of developing the UI5 application. The execution of the application doesn't start from the index file. All the bootstrap process already should be happened, and we basically call the component.js file, which holds the information about specific particular application or a particular application component details and models and services, and our application get loaded. So if we want to test this application, how we can do it? Previously, you will find in SAT a index.html file. You just go ahead with the index.html file and right click and test. So that's the way. If you have any application for 1.28 version, you can do that and you can run that particular application. The browser will come up. Now there is one more way you can basically find your service belong to this particular application by which you can launch the application. You go to SICF, the maintenance of the service. So here I execute and I go to the structure SAP BC, and here I will be going into UI5_UI5 inside my SAP application. Here at the end, all the Z application will be coming, and you can see that Z First App. This is our app which we pushed, and I can right click and test it as well. But it will open a URL where we will not find anything because at present we don't have index.html file. This is the URL for our particular application, but will not find anything. Now, how can we see our application? Our application is already inside SAP system. Now to do that, I will have to put it inside my Fiori Launchpad. In the Launchpad, we will be adding this particular tile as our application. Now this is going to be an additional step which you need to learn, because at this point, if you want to launch our application, we need to basically bootstrap the entire code. The bootstrapping is a process where we load the entire UI5 code in a different Launchpad. This Launchpad is already bootstrapped with all the code, and we have to basically place our application in this Fiori Launchpad. And this Launchpad for our user is going to be a central point, the first point, or as a home page from where they can navigate. Each tile represents one application. You can see that there are different categories: EPM, purchase, EPM, developer, EPM. These are some of the experimentation which we have done also in the previous section. We can customize the look and feel. We can drag and drop different application, and you can see that some of the numbers this represent from the service, how many purchase order are inside, how many products are inside here. So all that dynamic information you can see. Let's create a simple tile application, and we will add our application which we have pushed from our Web IDE with a very fancy timestamp, which is not usual, which is not correct in a way as well. We will change it later on, but for the demo purpose, this is okay. So what we are going to do now is we are going to go into the Fiori administration side. This is going to be few little steps. You note the URL here. This is the administration URL. If you want to know more about Fiori in general or details, from basics to details, you should go to Fiori for Developer course. This is highly recommended course for any UI5 developers who want to work with Fiori or want to work with customization or configuration. Okay, so what we do here, we pick the EPM, the one where we want to add the particular tile. We go to the catalogs here and we look into what is basically the catalog in which I want to add this application. So in the EPM employee, I want to add this application. I go into here, I have three different types of application. for the simplicity, let's create a simple static application, my PO demo PO app, and then I can basically select a icon from this F4 help, and let's select this one. And the semantic object basically categorize our application in what is the functional type this application belong. I have went into backend system and created a demo one, and let's select that. And here the action is what kind of action it is. It's approval, it's a manage order, what kind of application it is. Let's pick a demo. The parameters and target URL are designed specifically to navigate to your application directly without going into Launchpad. Now let's save this data here and come back to the home screen where we see that my PO app is properly made. The P is of small. Let's save it properly and come back here. Now what we see here is this tiles is one of the tile we have. We need to configure this and check all the configuration, and it has all the configuration proper. Now let's save it and come out, and here in this EPM create target mapping, and we would be creating the target mapping for our new app. Let's give it a few seconds and it will basically show us the new tile which we have created. And now it's created that. Let's go inside by pressing again the create target mapping. We search the ZDemo, the semantic object we created previously or we added previously when we are creating the tile. And here the important part, my app, this is the title. It can be related to app, and here this is going to be very important. This basically shows what is the app which we need to show there. So I will get the URL, I will go for the test allow, and I just need the URL here from SAP to my app. Let's copy this and go back to our configuration screen. This. Now here I will be required to give the ID. ID would be the namespace. Here if you go to the app in the component.js, you can see the namespace is demo, which we gave, demo.component. So we will give the namespace as demo. So let's copy this and we come here and paste it here. So these are the information URL and ID, which is the most important, which says that what is the app which we need to target and what is the namespace we have. So once we do that, to save it and come back, catalog is done. The only thing which is left is we go to the group, and in the group we go to this EPM and we see a new tile. Where is the EPM? So if we come back and see what is we configured employee EPM, we need to create a new group here, and from here we need to select what is the catalog which we basically use. So this here, this is the new app, my PO, and this EPM is basically the catalog we basically selected, and this is the new tile we added. And I just kind of click here, and this particular tile is now also part of the group, as you can see. Now if you have a particular user have the group access of EPM, employee EPM, and the catalog access of employee EPM, he or she will be seeing our application. So let's go to the Launchpad and let's see if we are able to see the tile. This is the tile, we are able to see it. We have not added a number here, which is the dynamic tile, have not made it dynamic to reduce complexity. If you want to know how to do that, you can go ahead and see our Fiori for Developer course. Now let's see if we are able to see this application, the application where the funny timestamp is shown in the list part. So let's see if we are able to see that. And yes, we are able to see that. So we are able to see the application. This is navigated from the Fiori Launchpad coming in our SAP ECC system. This is inside that. Now if you want to do any changes, you just do the changes here in the Web IDE, and you have to basically deploy it to your ABAP system, and then those changes will be reflected in your Launchpad. So this is the entire end-to-end creating a simple application, deploying it in backend of your SAP system and putting it in the Fiori Launchpad. Now for the backend, we have Use a SAP system, which is embedded in nature, both the front end and the backend component. Front end means where the front end of the application should be hosted, and the backend is where the services should be executed to get the data in the ABAP code. So those are in the same system. This is an embedded system, or the primary system used for learning purpose. So you can practice with this embedded system, and in real life you will be working mostly with the hub deployment model. The scenarios are not much different. The functionality is only different in case of the communication between the front end and the backend component happens with the RFC when it comes to data. So the final thing which remains with us is your Git setting. We have covered the step 1, 2, 3. So the next thing which we will see is connecting to the GitHub, deploying or pushing our application to this GitHub. We will be using GitHub as a repository where multiple developers would be continuously or simultaneously working together. So these two things we will be working out. And if you want to see or get access to this GitHub with Web IDE, then you can log on to UI5CN. This is the course UI5 Fiori and New UX Getting Started. You will also have a simple cards in the top, and that card will lead you to this course where you will find the course or the module added here. So log on to ui5cn.com and sign up with this Fiori and New UX Getting Started course. You will be having access to how to work with GitHub when it comes to Web IDE. So I hope that this entire section is helpful to you. I hope that you got an understanding about how to work with Web IDE basic. We might be or we should be doing some enhancement over the application which we deploy in the Fiori Launchpad in the previous section. Also make sure to check our Web IDE course. If you go to SAP here, the Web IDE Professional and Advanced course is one of the best way to learn Web IDE and related technology skills. In this particular course, we have covered about Web IDE, integration with cloud, integration with ERP backend, integration, all the customization, debugging, creating the application, which we have just seen how to create it from scratch, but how to work on that, how to expand on that, more detail about manifest.json, more detail on component.js, more detail on routing. Everything is covered here. You can see as well the syllabus. So this is one of the best top rated course we have, and make sure to at least try it with your free trial. So my name is Ajay Naik, and I hope that this section would be helpful to you in understanding SAP Web IDE with Fiori Launchpad deployment. And I hope to see you in more sections. If you like this video and want to see more videos on your particular topic, then please comment in the comment section below in YouTube video. And also if you have any queries related to this section, want to add something, or we have missed something, or you want to tell us that, okay, you should be also adding that particular part and we will cover that, please let us know in the comment section of this video. And if you have not subscribed to this channel, then subscribe. My name is Ajay Naik, and learn simple.